If you grew up in the 80s, then you know that we were a part of one of the greatest time periods in pop culture history, a time period that was just infused with pop culture that would go on to inspire the next few generations. Comic books and cartoons, toys, movies that are still being remade over and over and over again today and are continuing to inspire new shows as we go. I sometimes feel like I was born with an Atari controller in one hand and a Marvel's Star Wars comic book in the other. Once the 80s rolled around, especially once the Reagan administration had lifted all of the rules governing how you can make children's entertainment and what you can do as far as advertising to children, some of the greatest cartoons of our time period came out. You had He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, G.I. Joe, the Transformers, the Thundercats, and so many others. And all these properties would generally follow a pattern. They would come out with the toy line, and then to market that, they would do a cartoon series, either on Saturday mornings or syndicated before or after school, so that you'd have the toys and then you'd have the 30-minute, what you thought was a TV series, but was really a 30-minute advertisement every day or every weekend, showing you what new toys you needed to bug your parents for. And then during the middle of that, you get advertisements for other shows, other toys, cereals that were tied into it, just melting our little minds. And sometimes with these shows and with these cartoons and with these toys, they would also come out with a supplemental comic book series that would go with it. Usually they were just a mini series that started off that kind of mirrored the first few episodes of the series. And then after that, if it was successful and it continued on, they'd, instead of just doing the adaptation, they'd do more stories that were more or less just, add a few of them together, and it would be like another episode of the cartoon for those of you that couldn't get enough of the cartoon going on. And those comic books were fine. You had the He-Man and Thundercats and Silverhawks and all these others, and they were fine. There were a couple exceptions to the they were fine rule. And those were G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, and Transformers, More Than Meets the Eye by Marvel Comics. I should tell you, hi, I'm Paul. This is Indie Pop Productions, pop culture from an independent point of view. Now, if you've been following me for a while, then you might know it's been a minute since I've made one of these. I did a few earlier this year, and then I was going to carry on in the summer, had some ideas. I was going to talk about Disney World and a bunch of other things based on a trip that my wife and I took this summer, first time going to Disney World in a long time. But I was busy. I've got a lot going on. This is just one of my many hobbies, something I love to do for my own pleasure. It's not my job. I don't get money out of doing this. And I was like, you know what? I did a few. It was fun. Some of my friends watched it. We had a good time. I think I'm done. I think I'm done. I don't need to keep doing this. But then recently, I went to a trade days. If you don't know what trade days is, think of it as a giant flea market. If you don't know what a flea market is, it's a massive garage sale with multiple vendors. And I found something at this trade days that I said, I am going to have to get that, and I'm going to have to make a video about it, maybe multiple videos, we'll see. This is not that story. That is still coming. That's going to be a more complicated video. It's coming soon, I promise. But right now, I'm going to talk about this new unboxing that I'm about to do and another property that I've gotten my hands on recently. Now, if you remember, if you followed me back to the earliest few, there's not like a massive catalog of my videos, but some of the earliest ones, then you remember that I did an unboxing for a series of G.I. Joe comics that were put out by Skybound Entertainment, Robert Kirkman's production company. Robert Kirkman, Invincible, The Walking Dead. He'd gotten the rights to G.I. Joe and the Transformers and was putting out these awesome new comic books. They called it the Energon Universe, put them together and was telling new stories. But to get everybody hyped up, especially about the history of these properties, he did a Kickstarter, which ended up at that time period being the most successful comic book Kickstarter in history, raising money to put out a box set that was going to contain every single G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero issue of it put out by Marvel Comic Books back in the 80s. And it was a beautiful set. I was happy to open it up. I'll show you. I've got it right here. Beautiful box, and you open it up. Around. Came in 4 volumes, faux leather, beautifully engraved. snake eyes on the cover of this one. Each one's engraved with a different character. They had a good guy box set and a bad guy box set. I got the good guy box set because I'm a goody-goody. Beautiful art on the inside. I have barely even cracked these open because I want to keep them as is because they're so beautiful. But they did send them as digital files as well. So I have been reading them and loving those comic books since then. So many of them, I haven't read them all, but I have read quite a few of those. And I remember when I got my hands on that, I kept thinking, I sure hope they do a matching one of the Transformers so I can have the double box set. But if I remember correctly, then there weren't nearly as many issues of the Transformers as there were of the G.I. Joe. So I didn't know how they were going to take that and make a matching box set so that we could all have a set, even though I knew just getting the vibe online that that's what everyone that backed this Kickstarter was hoping they would do because everybody really loved it and got really excited about it. The other problem was, while I loved G.I. Joe and the Transformers, with G.I. Joe, I loved it, I enjoyed it, I watched the cartoon, but I clearly knew and enjoyed the fact that the comic book was much better. It was better written, most of those being written by Larry Hama. I'm not sure if it's Hama or Hama, I apologize. But they were significantly better written, great art on those, especially for the time period, very Marvel Comics style art instead of just being something that would match the cartoon series. And they told more serious, kind of darker, edgier stories sometimes, in which characters would actually potentially die throughout the series. Not like Game of Thrones level, but you know, there were deaths. You never knew if one of your favorite characters was going to die if you read the comic books. But with Transformers, my love for the Transformers was based more on the cartoon series, especially the movie. My 10-year-old mind was blown away by the movie. And to this day, Hot Rod / Rodimus Prime remains my favorite of all the Transformers characters. I know everybody loves Optimus, but for me, it's always been Hot Rod Rodimus, especially the Hot Rod version of him that was took up most of the movie. Love that character, and I maybe in the entire run read 1 or 2 issues of the comic books. It wasn't because it wasn't good. It wasn't because I didn't like the ones I read. I just was so into the cartoon series that I just never touched it. But what I didn't know at the time, or at least I knew, but I never really put 2 and 2 together. I knew it logically because I've seen them, but I never really got into them, was while G.I. Joe had sort of 2 lines that it went down. You know, it kind of took a fork in the road. You went one way with the cartoon series and the kind of mirroring it, but a little more serious and a little darker. You had the comic book series telling its own stories, not supplementing each other, telling their own stories as they went down the road. Transformers, as I understood it, did more or less the same thing. You had the Transformers cartoon that was kind of kid-friendly, the way the G.I. Joe cartoon series was, until you hit the movie, and you know, then you had just this level of carnage in the first act of the show in which everyone you loved from the first 2 seasons just got slaughtered like an entire series of Game of Thrones shoved into 30 minutes, less than 30 minutes, which starring robots, and we just carnage all over the place. And then you had, kind of running beside that, you had the edgy comic book, which I guess if you were reading that, you might not have been so shocked by the carnage in that first part of the movie. But what I didn't think about was, while these 2 were going on, you had a third prong of the fork going off over here, telling its own stories, which was a UK series of comic books that each of these kind of telling slightly different continuity of more or less the same story. So what they have done, what Skybound Entertainment has done with this Kickstarter that ran earlier this year, and we're just now getting to see, is they have done an edit of the American Transformers comics and the UK comics and edited them together to tell one cohesive story, so that if not in quality, and I'm hoping in quality, I just haven't read them yet, but at least in volume, you can create a box set to rival that beautiful G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero box set. So I'm curious, I hope you're curious. I haven't watched any of the videos to see if anybody beat me to it and cracked these open before me. I'm sure they have, but I'm excited to get into it, look at the various stretch goal goodies that they've thrown in here, because this one actually made even more money and set more records than the G.I. Joe Kickstarter did. So let's crack this bad boy open. Big box. Bigger than most of my Kickstarter comic book boxes. don't know if you're wondering, especially if you watch this at a later date, my fireplace doesn't always look like this. If you see my fireplace in a couple of the other videos, it's the day after Christmas. Decorations are still up. Merry Christmas if you're watching it when it's new, and Happy New Year. Okay, first thing's right on the top. And again, I got the good guys box. There's a good guys box and a bad guys box. In this case, the bad guy box actually looked cooler. You're gonna see when I get this open. I believe that the volumes themselves are red. I didn't really care for the red. The Decepticon purple looked significantly cooler than the Autobot red. But Hot Rod, if there's gonna be potentially anything Hot Rod on this anywhere, I wanted to make sure that I got it, so I chose the Autobot version. Little patch, looks like it's actually, no, it's not two-sided. It just looks purple from the other side because it's faded. Little patch, Autobot symbol, very cool. Then we've got, looks like this is one of those challenge coins, a Transformers challenge coin, if you can make that out. That's actually pretty nice. Autobot decal, like that, very shiny, holographic, surrounding looking 80s style sticker. That is, I think that's Jazz. See if you can make that out. That's pretty cool. Bookmark. So this Autobots and Decepticon fans got both. Got Starscream on one side and Bumblebee on the other. Okay. There's gonna be several in here, so I'm gonna crack this open. I don't think any of these are the lenticular pictures. These are just little prints. So I'm gonna crack this open. We'll take a peek at these. Starscream, nice. Oddly getting bad guys here since I got the good guys set. I don't know if there was a mix and you just got both. That's Soundwave. I always get Shockwave and Soundwave. Soundwave, yes. Shockwave is the other gun. Got a very nice Autobot pin. Let's see what is in this. This you actually have to rip open. Just white package. It's comic book size, so we'll see what this is. Oh, nice. Yes, there were some reprints of old Transformers comic books. Reprinted issue 2 of the original limited series. Did I get a good shot on that? That doesn't have too much glare. Number 5, largely I think they wanted to reprint this one just because that is an awesome cover. I think they redid that a little bit. And later on, post-movie, you got this really cool Galvatron cover. That is a great cover. Yeah, that's Galvatron. Now, if you remember the original Transformers, if you were old enough to remember that, they used to come with these little decodable, like a long strip, and it would tell you about the character, and you like put this little decoder thing on it and show you their power levels and things. I only vaguely even remember it. But that, instead of the cards, trading cards like we got with G.I. Joe, that's what they did with this. So I got a few packs here of the add-ons of those. Which is good, because I don't want a chance ripping anything. All right. First one, oh, that's nice. First one is just Simon Furman, who wrote all those great episodes, kind of like you had Larry Hama, who wrote all those great G.I. Joe issues. Simon Furman wrote Transformers. I don't really think that little red strip does anything, even looking at it outside of the camera. You guys certainly can't see anything, but very nice. I do love that. Another. Looks like they each come with their own strip, so we don't have to worry about using the same strip on all of them. But this one is Jetfire. Very nice. Get that close enough so make sure you can see it. Very cool. Again, don't really think that red strip does much of anything. I remember thinking it was super cool when I was a kid, but it really doesn't look like that is doing any good. And then we've got a bigger pack. This has got all the, I guess, non-special ones. I'm not sure. I don't remember what it took to get those 2 special ones that are outside of the big pack. But we're gonna crack this open and see what all is in here. Much larger amount, that's for sure. It would probably be much more collectible if I wasn't ripping this open, but I really want to look at them. I really wanted to do this video, so yeah, there we go. Another one of these strips. I'm really not going to bother with this. I'm just going to put that aside, and we're going to go through the characters. Similar to the lenticular picture I showed. Yeah, the lenticular picture I showed earlier. Here is Jazz, always a fan favorite. Mirage. Ultra Magnus, again, back to my love of the movie. RC, which I believe was our first female Autobot. Blaster, had Soundwave earlier, now we have his Autobot counterpart Blaster. And here we go, the reason, probably just this one card is the reason I had to absolutely have the Autobot set, but Rodimus Prime. Wheeljack, if I remember correctly, was one of the victims of the, as I mentioned earlier, Game of Thrones level of carnage in Act 1 of the movie. Ratchet, that I think might have also been a part of that madness, but I know Wheeljack was. Fortress Maximus, the massive toy set that every kid wanted, but I never actually knew anybody that had. Never even saw one in person. Again, similar with Metroplex. Prowl. Grimlock. Second piece of Grimlock memorabilia in here. Hot Rod, so I guess I got both parts of the Hot Rod and Rodimus Prime set, so 2 pieces that make it worth having the Autobot set for me, since that is my favorite character. Omega Supreme, again, back to the giant sets. No one that I knew owned. Ironhide, which was the most devastating, because he was the second in command, so when he ate it in the first few minutes of the movie, that was shocking for everyone. Bumblebee, one of the few survivors who eventually became Golden Bug over the course of the final season and a half of what was left of Transformers after the movie. And of course, Optimus Prime, whom died in the movie, ruined so many kids' childhood. Not mine, I guess. I was a sick kid. I just thought that was such a great story, handing it off to the new leader. But did come back later in the series because of the backlash. And I think the person that renamed Bumblebee into Golden Bug, if I remember correctly, and took the matrix of leadership back from Rodimus Prime, making him Hot Rod again, which honestly, to be fair, they kind of ruined him as Rodimus. Hot Rod was a much better character, and it's certainly big enough to rival it. So I'm assuming this is a matching set, just based on the size and weight of this thing. So let's get into it. Another box within this box. I remember that was the same way last time. Looks like a Russian doll here. A lot to get into, but it does do a good job of taking care of it by packing it so well. I give them props for that. Yep, it looks the same, or at least, stylistically the same. Very cool. Oh yeah, that just comes right open. Good boxing. I appreciate good packaging. So, Transformers, front and back are the same on that. And of course we've got Optimus and a bunch of the Transformers in one action shot. Really does match the stylistic way they made the G.I. Joe box set. Nothing spectacular on the bottom. That is really great art. I believe on the G.I. Joe one it was Andy Kubert. I think this might be the same. It is really, really good art. Optimus Prime era, early G1. So unfortunately it does not have Hot Rod in there anywhere. Mostly this is characters on here that ate it in the first few minutes of Transformers the movie. All right, let's get the plastic off and look at it on the inside. Yeah, this is just like that beautiful G.I. Joe set. These are gonna look great next to each other in my collection. All right, so it's top, it just sort of opens up very nicely. You can see, as I mentioned earlier, let me flip it around for a better view. Beautiful set, a little bit different. Bright shiny red with blue gilded pages. Difference is these aren't as, oh, there's some more in there. These aren't as differentiated as the G.I. Joe ones. The G.I. Joe ones were much like this, except they did each have an engraved character on them, so each one had a different character. These all look exactly the same, except they've got the, obviously it's red and says Transformers instead of dark blue and says G.I. Joe. This is a little more silver, so you can read it a little better. Volume down here, Till All Are One, which they started saying in the movie. This is the Till All Are One set because it does combine both volumes or versions of the comic books into one story. And something is falling out of this, so apparently there is a little bit more here. Oh, that's right. Okay, there's a little mini poster. It is Optimus, of course. Not my favorite character, but everyone else's. Very nice. And I do love Optimus. I just particularly loved Hot Rod. And this is the book plate. If you got in at a certain time, and they would redo it every once in a while, but you had to be so fast to get it. You could have signed up for it to get a signed book plate by Simon Furman. I never managed to make it in there, but there we go. Very cool to at least have an unsigned version. Very similar. I have the unsigned Larry Hama. It's the same story. I could just never quite get in there fast enough anytime they'd redo it. Didn't raise the price. Oh, okay, well this is cool. I was complaining at first that they didn't have the engraved character on the side. The G.I. Joe ones have the engraved character on the side, but not on the front. These do have them on the front. Of course, you can make that out. The engraving is so hard to see, but Optimus being on the first one, I do like, if you can see, it's not just blue embossed. It is that kind of holographic material. That is a really, really nice touch. I'm not gonna open this up all the way. I'm just kind of take a peek at the art on the inside. So it is that classic 80s style, Marvel style art, better than what you're gonna get from pretty much any other adaptation of the cartoon at the time period, but still pretty, I mean, it just looks like Marvel comic art of the early to mid 80s, which is a good thing as far as I'm concerned. Volume 2, we've got, of course, Bumblebee. Volume 3, wait. Honestly, I can't. It's hard to tell. I'm wanting to say Jazz, but it might be Prowl. I know Jazz was more popular, and the only reason he was going to be one of the only ones to carry on into the new series after the movie. The only reason he didn't is because the movie happened, and then it was voiced by Scatman Crothers. Scatman Crothers passed away, and no one else can sound like Scatman Crothers without just straight up getting someone that does impressions and doing an impression of Scatman Crothers, and nobody wants that. And then last, Man, these are kind of hard to make out without any colors or anything, but oh man, you guys can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, if you can even make that out. I think that's Wheeljack. I was really hoping they would have someone from the post movie line on one of these, but these are all early G1 characters. First two were obvious ones, you know, Optimus and Bumblebee. You can't not have Optimus and Bumblebee, but I was hoping at least for the last volume. A lot of people don't want Hot Rod or Rodimus on there, even though I love him. People thought he was whiny, didn't care for him, except in the context of the movie, but once the series went around. But I was hoping they would at least have him or Ultra Magnus, maybe RC, since RC's been another project since then. They made the Transformers 1 movie a few years ago, and she was in that. So she's kind of stood the test of time as one of the newer characters from, you know, 40 plus 40 years ago, but new characters compared to the first two seasons she's introduced in the movie. Beautiful set. I love this. I'm so happy to have this and be able to put it in my collection. A few other companies have tried to do similar things where they put out nice box sets, or not box sets, but nice new volumes of, I think IDW has got the rights after they lost this to Skybound. They did right. They went back and they did some sets of, I know they did Thundercats, and they did Jim and the Holograms, but neither one of those was as long. The Jim and the Holograms wasn't even in the same time period. I mean, the Jim and the Holograms wasn't even, the comics were coming out then. They did a comic book series years later, and they recently did a box set, or not a box set again, a nice, really nice new edition of that. They did, like I said, the Thundercats. They did, what else did they do? They've got a lot of the rights to do the Disney stuff, which kind of surprised me that they had the rights to do the Disney stuff since Marvel is owned by Disney, but they're contracting that through IDW instead of having Marvel make those. But supposedly they're great. I have not read any of them. The only one that I was tempted to be a part of was Darkwing Duck, and Gargoyles have had some stuff come out, but I was never into those comics. That's another one of those ones. Well, the quality was probably high. I'd be willing to bet it was, just because of the people that were working on it, and the fact that in particular the Gargoyles cartoon series I thought was ahead of its time in storytelling and in art style, and the quality of the voice acting was just so much better than anything else at that time period. But I really wasn't interested in those box sets. Or again, they didn't even put those in a box, but in those nicer versions of the bound editions. But I didn't get into any of them. But this, I couldn't pass this up. Most of the stuff I do on Kickstarter is independent stuff or things that you can only get on there. But these are beautiful. I love it. So happy to have it. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will hopefully see you really soon with some of the cool new stuff I have, in particular that special piece that I picked up at Trade Days, the giant garage sale with multiple vendors. All right, see you guys in the new year. Have a good one.